So, universal creative genius is our theme for this month, this opening month of 2018. That's not only a great idea for starting the new year. I believe it's the greatest way to start each day, frankly, by knowing that is who and what resides within each one of us, that universal creative genius. And today's topic is useit.com/it's easy. I've used that title because, like the internet, sometimes called the World Wide Web, that universal creative genius is everywhere, equally present all the time, just like the internet. Well, most of the time for the internet, all the time with universal creative genius. I don't know how many times each of you uses the internet each day, but I'll surmise it's fairly frequently. And most of the time, it's easy. Well, using universal creative genius is easy too. However, we have to sign in to it, just like we sign in to the internet. And then be alert to how it operates. So this is a 21st century review of Ernest Holmes' chapter in the Science of Mind text titled What It Does, meaning what universal creative genius does. Because in order to recognize it in action, we need to be cognizant of its actions in real time. I want to share with you, last week I had a computer expert whose business is located here in our part of the island come in and spend some time with my laptop computer and my iPhone. Many of you know him because his knowledge, his professionalism, and his availability enables us to have the service and the trust that he provides. He's an expert in what the computer and the iPhone can do. He understands incoming, meaning the internet, the data flow, and the email, and how they operate or how they work, even though we only see the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we see on the screen. He can and does go behind the curtain, so to speak, which in this case means behind the displays that we typically see on those screens, and he uncovers the most fascinating information, some of which enhances the functions of our hardware and our software, and some of which does not. It was such an education for me to watch him work. I had a list of things that I wanted him to check, eliminate, add to, or make changes in. And it was incredible to watch him work and to talk about what he was doing as he was doing it, so I didn't feel like I was off on another planet somewhere totally unaware of what was happening. Now, some of you know how to do that for yourselves, I'm sure. You've tapped into that expression of what universal creative genius does, and you grapple with those challenges yourself. I, on the other hand, hire the person who does it every day for profit, and gladly, trustingly, joyfully accommodate him in that regard, even as he accommodates me with swift, careful, complete, and efficient service. That's another way of saying how each of us expresses that universal creative genius in our own unique way, that coming through us, that ability that we have to utilize it for our own highest and best, for our own best use and good. This week for me, that is having him complete the tasks that I laid out to be addressed, and then using that process in this talk this morning, which is how I express universal creative genius flowing through me. So it's with understanding how universal principles work and express that is what Dr. Holmes calls the riddle of simplicity. In the chapter on what it does, first he both challenges us and comforts us by saying that this is a riddle of simplicity. He encourages us to approach the study of metaphysics rationally. The intelligence can acquaint us with it only as we are able and willing to receive its ideas. To be revealed, it must have an outlet. What we draw from it, we must draw through our own minds. So universal creative genius is nothing until there's an outlet. It's not that it isn't there, but it isn't active. It isn't manifesting itself on behalf of universal flow. And sometimes, Dr. Holmes cautions, we look way too far away for reality or for answers. That, of course, requires us to establish unity in order to stay local, to stay within our view, our range of spiritual sight, so to speak. That this infinite knowingness that we are immersed in is not out there somewhere, at least not for us. It's everywhere, equally present all the time. But when I am speaking my word, then what's manifesting is directly related to that. If I'm not open to that, if I'm not alert to that, if I'm not paying attention, it's still out there. That's what happens when you hear about somebody having a great idea and they don't act on it, and 6 months, a year, 10 years later, somebody patents that same idea, and the first person says, "But that's mine." But it wasn't, because they never acted on it. They just let it go by. So this is the very intelligence by and through which we perceive an infinite mind constitutes our receptivity to it. So it's all about that receptivity. Are you open? Are you listening? Are you looking? Are you preparing for the fruits of your labor? What would happen if, like we heard about in Standing in the Light today, you successfully found and purchased a new vehicle and you had no place to put it, no place to park it, no way to use it? Maybe you didn't have a license. Maybe for one reason or another, you weren't able to put gasoline in it. What good would it be? You see, that's all about preparation, isn't it? That's about the planning that results in the manifestation that serves you. So Holmes suggests that we practice a sane simplicity where this kind of thing is concerned, rather than what he calls the tendency to get caught up in a ponderosity of thought. That's the only time I can ever remember having seen or heard that word, a ponderosity. And it's in the chapter on what it does in the Science of Mind text. Closest I could get to that was the ponderosa. Remember that? But this is a ponderosity. Like you just ponder and ponder and ponder and nothing comes of it because you're just only pondering. Another way of saying that would be, just don't overthink it. You know, move on it. If it's really a good idea, if you're really sold on this good idea, move on it. We are actually surrounded by and immersed in a perfect life. As much of that as we willingly understand and embody, Holmes says, shows up as a conscious, acceptable, and understandable result. Well, that doesn't sound bad, does it? A conscious, acceptable, and understandable result. The universal mind, or if you prefer, the originating energy, contains all knowledge, just waiting to be expressed. It's like saying you get to put the legs on it so that it has meaning and action in this thing we call life. Some of us draw as much as we can conceive, and others don't know they can draw as much as they can conceive. Or that conceiving something, which is like birthing something, you birth an idea, you birth a business, you birth a home. That idea comes into reality. So as great as your conception of it is, that great it can be. And that's all. So that's a good idea. Gives you the idea that thinking big is a good idea. And Lloyd Strauss says, if you have a big idea and nothing is manifesting as a result of it, have a bigger idea. Which is another way of saying opening up to greater possibilities. So some of us draw one kind and others draw another kind of possibilities into our lives because we have different types of receptivity. Even within our philosophy, we have different types of receptivity. We don't all intend the same things in our lives. The one thing we do is that we honor what is important in the lives of others, even as we honor what's important in our own life, rather than trying to tweak everybody else to the exact same thing that we are, or do, or say. Universal creative genius is much better at that. It does not produce one thing and make eternal copies. Each idea is treated individually so that what you manifest is purely yours, assuming that you manifest it. It's infinite. Universal creative genius is infinite. And the possibility of differentiating it is limitless. So God's not going to run out of ideas. Don't feel like you're draining it or you're getting more than your share. That's all it does. It's an energy. That's all it does. So the likelihood of you drawing down the inventory is none. That likelihood is none. You can continue to expand your thoughts, your ideas, the things that come into your life as a result of it, ad infinitum. Go for it. You can never outgive God. So we all, in this room at least, know that our mental work must be definite. The first principle of this is goodness. And as far as our thoughts and actions tend toward a constructive outcome, we eventually succeed. It's good to be well. It's good to be happy. It's good to enjoy life. It's good to express freedom. I haven't used this phrase for a while, but I'm sure you'll remember hearing it from me. There is one life. That life is good. That life is God's life. That life is my life right now. What a great affirmation. You can start a treatment that way. You can use that affirmation daily, or more often if you choose. It's easy to remember, short, to the point, definite. It can also be expanded into a spiritual mind treatment and used creatively each time you do a treatment. Which reminds me to remind you that each time you do a spiritual mind treatment, it's a new, original expression. While we often memorize and repeat affirmations by rote, the wording of a spiritual mind treatment must be new and fresh each time you do it. And that's because each time you do it, you put the energy of those words into universal creative genius. And whether you see immediate results or not, it's already in your consciousness at some level. That in and of itself may stir you to move forward rather than to mark time or march in place. So it's important to let that next treatment that you do, if you do on the same subject, let that flow from you without editing it yourself or reading it from last time. Allow yourself to be surprised, perhaps even amazed, at the words that come forth when you treat that next spiritual mind treatment as if it were a brand new one, even though your topic may be the same or similar. Because what's happening there is there's a flow of energy and you're building on it. If you do the same treatment over and over, you always get what you always got. You're already there. Now move on. So I'd also like to remind you that trained thought is far more powerful than untrained thought. The more power one gives to his or her thought, the more completely she or he believes that the thought has power. The more power it will have. The more you believe it has power, the more power it will have. So, how do we do that? Treatment is active, not passive. Treatment is a statement into universal law, embodying the concrete idea of our intentions and accompanied by an unqualified faith that the law works for us as we work with it. So there's no mystery in any of these truths. Faith and trust have power consciously to oppose, neutralize, erase, and obliterate any opposite mental attitude to what I just said. Our word is active, not passive. It's really important to understand that. Whenever you speak your word, it goes into eternity. It doesn't stop at the door or at the edge of your property. It goes out into the universe like radio waves go out into the universe. How do you suppose we talk to missiles and space stuff if those waves don't go out into the universe? Think about that. It's kind of like, you think Alexa is brand new? Your stuff's been going out there into the universe all along. It's just that Alexa is listening to everything you say. I'm not sure God listens to everything you say. There are days when I hope God doesn't listen to everything I say. But the truth is, it's going out there just like it's hitting Alexa. So think about that. It's an interesting concept, and here we are in the 21st century, and we have that, some of us not, sitting on the counter, listening to everything you say. So faith and trust must have power consciously to oppose, neutralize, erase, and obliterate any opposite mental attitudes. It's active, not passive. It's not about sitting around hoping something will happen. When we do our treatment work, we are constructively, actively stating, sensing, knowing some specific good. Lean into that. Here's an example that Holmes uses. It's a little shop worn, it's a little time dated, but it's still true in a lot of places. I've seen this. In an iron foundry, the pig iron is thrown into a great furnace and melted. Have any of you ever been in a foundry to see this? It's awesome to experience. It's also quite warm. That which was solid becomes liquid. And it's then poured into a mold, in many molds in a foundry, which are fashioned in different shapes. It's kind of like making Jell-O pops in the kitchen in a much greater expansion of things going on. So that iron neither knows nor cares about the particular form it takes. It's formless. It's ready to take any form supplied. If we did not place it in the proper molds, the liquid would assume no proper or particular form. It would just be a useless blob. So this is how it is in dealing with the subtle energy of spirit. But the molds are made in our own subjective minds through conscious and specific thought, purpose, and direction. We should be very careful not to think that because we make the mold, we must create the substance or the pig iron. What we make is the thought, and that thought already exists. What we make is the intention for how to use that thought, what direction it goes, what manifests as a result of it. This is the part of life in which we live. This is a part of the universal energy. This is how it works. This is what it does. So here's the really good news about what it does. Hope is merely a subtle illusion. It's better than despair, but it is an unconscious compromise. Has no part in an effective spiritual mind treatment or an affirmation. Whenever we think, something happens. There's no limit to thought and the field through which it operates, because that's infinite. Holmes reminds us that it is the nature of being, life energy, to act upon thought. And here's the easy part. We're surrounded by and immersed in an infinite good. It's ours to use as fully as we choose to individually. So our call is to choose wisely, to be prepared to do that, and to utilize scientific spiritual mind treatment to do so. And then, how much of that which is ours to tap into, how much of that is ours to tap into? And the answer is all of it. How much may we have to use? And the answer is as much of it as we can embody, what we can take in, what we're prepared to express. In a nutshell, useit.com/it's easy. And so it is.